So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. We're going to be doing a quick walkthrough of Form CC-305. It's the Voluntary Self-Identification of Disability, and it's a document used by federal contractors and subcontractors in the United States. It's required by the OFCCP, or the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, which is part of the U.S. Department of Labor. And this form is meant to help federal contractors and subcontractors use the information for affirmative action and equal employment opportunity purposes. And it's supposed to help them assess their diversity and inclusion efforts in compliance with Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And I'll be honest, I get a lot of questions of this. Should I disclose on this form? Should I disclose that I have a disability? And I'll give the answer towards the end. We're going to go over the form as a whole, make sure you understand it and a little bit of the history behind it, and then talk through at the end whether or not you should answer the form. So the form has a series of questions related to disability status, and they can choose whether or not to disclose whether or not they have a disability, and it's completely voluntary, and the information is kept confidential. That will be key for later on. This form is part of the Rehab Act of 1973, which is a key piece of legislation in the United States addressing affirmative action. Key provisions of Section 503 is affirmative action requirements. It requires federal contractors and subcontractors to take affirmative action to employ and advance in employment qualified individuals with disabilities. It encourages equal opportunity in employment. It prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities by federal contractors and subcontractors in all aspects of employment. It mandates that federal contractors invite applicants and employees to voluntarily self-identify, as well as report on what they receive from that information. There may be subject to reporting requirements to the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. And it prohibits, the law, Section 503 prohibits retaliation against individuals who assert their rights under the law and prohibits them from discrimination. So let's get into the form today. Well, first thing you need to know is that this form can take many different languages. If you need to, you can read it in Arabic, you can read it in German, you can read it in any other language. Now that we've got the language out of the way, the Department of Labor, in the context of the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs and the Rehab Act of 1973, uses the following definition of disability. An individual with a disability is defined as a person with physical or mental impairments that substantially limit one of the more major life activities. Those life activities can include things like caring for themselves, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, lifting, bending, speaking, breathing, learning, reading, etc. A person with a record of such an impairment, someone who has a history of it, even if they didn't actually have it, but they were maybe misclassified, they're still considered disabled, even though they weren't actually disabled. Or people who are perceived to have an impairment, people who are understood to have impairment that, again, do not actually have this one. And that's part of the broader concept of disability rights in the United States. And I'll be honest, most countries don't really hold a candle to the United States with respect to disability rights. It's very broad, it's very wide ranging, and it's significantly different than many countries that we cover on this channel. When you see this form, you're likely to be hired. If you have an employee ID, of course, put that down, as well as the name and the date. They encourage you to disclose whether or not you're a disability. They're looking for at least 7% of their workers to have disabilities, and of course it's voluntary. No one will actually see this. No one making hiring decisions will see this disclosure, and that's really important for people to know and for people to understand the implication here. It's pretty limited. People ask this channel frequently, am I supposed to disclose this? The answer is it doesn't matter. You're not going to be asking for an accommodation through this process. You're not going to be alerting a hiring manager in any way. It just doesn't matter. And if you think it does, you can choose I do not want to answer, and it doesn't matter. So disabilities here are, again, very broad. Epilepsy makes sense. ADHD, autism, spectrum disorder, partial or complete paralysis. You can see an example here, but it's really important to understand a broader context of what a disability looks like in the United States, which is, as I talked about before, anything that limits one or more of your major life activities. And we covered that a bit ago. That's important. That's what defines a disability in the United States, specifically surrounding the OFCCP. You're welcome to choose whichever disability, if you've had a disability or have one in the past. No, I do not have a disability, etc. And again, It's only for record keeping purposes. They have the goal of employing at least 7% of their workers as people with disability. I'll be honest, the broad nature of disability in the workplace makes me think that most employers are already there, because this is, again, a very broad definition. The answer to the question at the beginning, yeah, feel free. If you don't feel comfortable, don't. But it really doesn't matter. It's just for record keeping for your employer. But many prospective employees really freak out over this one. Let me know what you think about this form in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.